The air was thick with tension as the Trogrians closed in. Their glowing eyes fixed on the small group of humans in Zira, the forest. Once quiet and peaceful, now felt like a battleground. Ethan, Lena, and Zara stood at the edge of the clearing, ready to face whatever came next. The artifact was closer than it had ever been, and now they had to protect it, no matter what. Ethan stepped forward, his eyes narrowing at the approaching Trogrians. He had faced many challenges in his life, but nothing had prepared him for this. The artifact wasn't just a weapon, it was something much more powerful. And it seemed like the Trogrians knew that. "We've come too far to let you take it," Ethan said, his voice cold but firm. He wasn't just protecting a piece of technology. He was protecting humanity's future. The lead Trogrian sneered, his long claws flexing in anticipation. "You're fools if you think you can stop us, human," the creature growled. "We've already won. The artifact will be ours, and nothing you do will change that." Zara felt the weight of the Trogrian's words, but she didn't flinch. She had already seen what humans were capable of. Ethan's confidence wasn't just bravado, it was earned. They had already survived so much together, and Zara knew that whatever happened, they wouldn't give up without a fight. Lena stood beside Ethan, her eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of movement. "We can't let them get to the artifact," she said, her voice steady. "We have to stop them here, no matter the cost." Zara glanced around the clearing. There was no time for second thoughts. The Trogrians were closing in, and they had no intention of backing down. She turned to Ethan and Lena. "We need a plan," she said, her voice calm but urgent. Ethan nodded, his mind already working on a strategy. "We'll hold them off as long as we can," he said. "But we need to keep them distracted long enough for one of us to reach the artifact. It's the only way." Lena's eyes flicked to the Trogrians. "I'll create a diversion," she said. "Zira, you and Ethan go for the artifact. If we don't stop them now, we never will." Zara felt a sense of responsibility settle in her chest. She had come here to observe humanity, to study their weaknesses. But now, she was fighting alongside them, not as an observer, but as an ally. This was no longer about understanding their survival instincts. It was about protecting something far more important, as Lena moved off to the side. Preparing her diversion, Ethan turned to Zara. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low. Zara looked at him, her gaze steady. "I've been ready for this since the moment I saw you fight the Trogrians." Ethan gave her a quick nod. Without another word, they moved toward the artifact's location, keeping low and using the trees for cover. The Trogrians hadn't noticed them yet, but it wouldn't be long before they did. The clearing ahead was filled with strange, ancient symbols carved into the ground. In the center, there was a pedestal, and atop it sat the artifact. It glowed faintly, its energy pulsing with a power Zara couldn't fully comprehend. She could feel it calling to her, a strange, magnetic pull drawing her closer. Ethan reached the pedestal first, his eyes narrowing as he examined the artifact. He didn't touch it yet, as if waiting for something. "This is it," he muttered under his breath. "The key to everything." Zira stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the glowing object. It was beautiful, yet dangerous. The Trogrians had been right about one thing: it wasn't just an artifact. It was a source of unimaginable power, a tool that could change the course of history. But in the wrong hands, it could destroy everything. "We need to take it," Zara said quietly, her voice filled with urgency. "Before they get to it," Ethan nodded. "I know, but we need to be careful. This thing, it's not like anything I've ever seen before." Just as Ethan reached out to grab the artifact, a shout rang out from the Trogrians. "There they are," one of them roared. Ethan and Zara turned just in time to see the Trogrians charging toward them. The fight had begun. The two humans and Zara stood their ground, weapons drawn, ready to defend the artifact at all costs. The Trogrians were relentless, but Ethan and Lena had been preparing for this. They had trained for moments like this, where they would have to outsmart and outfight their enemies. Lena appeared from the shadows, launching a flurry of smoke grenades that exploded in a cloud of thick, black smoke. The Trogrians hesitated, momentarily blinded by the dense fog. It was enough to give them the opening they needed. Now, Ethan shouted. Sierra didn't hesitate. She moved quickly, her instincts taking over as she joined Ethan at the pedestal. Together, they reached for the artifact, their hands brushing against its smooth surface. The moment their fingers touched it, a shockwave of energy surged through the clearing. The ground beneath them trembled, and a powerful light erupted from the artifact. Sending out a pulse that knocked the Trogrians back, Ethan and Zara both staggered. Caught off guard by the overwhelming energy, for a moment, everything went silent. Zara could feel the energy surging through her, filling her with a sense of power and clarity. It was as though the artifact was unlocking something deep inside her, something she hadn't known was there. But then, as quickly as the energy had come, it receded, leaving Zara breathless. She glanced at Ethan, who seemed equally stunned by the experience. "Did you feel that?" she asked, her voice shaky. Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah, it's more than just a weapon. This thing has the power to change reality itself." Before Zara could respond, the Trogrians regrouped, their eyes burning with fury. They had been knocked back, but they weren't out of the fight yet. One of the creatures raised its weapon, aiming directly at them. "We can't hold them off much longer," Zara said, her voice filled with urgency. "What do we do?" Ethan's mind raced. He knew they couldn't keep fighting forever. They had to get the artifact to safety. "We can't let them have it," he said firmly. "We'll destroy it if we have to." Zara hesitated. Destroy the artifact. She didn't know if that was even possible, but she trusted Ethan. He wouldn't say something like that unless it was their only option. Lena appeared beside them, her weapon raised. "We don't have time to argue. Let's get out of here now." Ethan nodded. He knew their only chance was to escape, to get far enough away from the Trogrians before they could retaliate. With the artifact in hand, they moved quickly, retreating into the dense forest. The Trogrians chased after them, but they were slowed by the thick underbrush. Ethan, Zara, and Lena knew the forest better. They used the terrain to their advantage, ducking through trees and dodging rocks, keeping the Trogrians at bay. But as they ran, Zara's mind was filled with doubt. The artifact was powerful. Too powerful. She couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just a tool, it was a force that could reshape the universe. It could change everything, and that terrified her. The sun hung low over the alien world of Zalora, casting long shadows across the massive arena that had been built to celebrate the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Spectators from countless planets filled the stands, their eyes eagerly fixed on the field below. The air buzzed with excitement as the sound of footsteps and murmurs filled the space. This was no ordinary arena. It was a place where the strongest of all species came to prove their worth. Each trial was a test of strength, intelligence, and endurance. And today, a human named Leo would face his biggest challenge yet. Standing at the edge of the arena, Leo felt a wave of nerves wash over him. He was smaller, weaker, and slower than most of the competitors here. Humans were rarely invited to these trials, and when they were often treated as nothing more than a curiosity. It didn't help that his opponent, Nira, was a member of the Zalorian race stall, powerful, highly trained in every form of combat. Her people had mastered physical and mental strength over thousands of years. They were born for this. Leo wasn't, but he wasn't here to give up either. "Are you sure you're up for this?" Nira's voice was cold and filled with amusement as she glanced down at him. "I've seen humans try before. They're always the first to fail. I doubt you'll be any different." Leo looked up at her, trying not to let her words get to him. Nira had already been through the trials many times, and her kind had never failed. She had come to expect victory as something that was simply hers by birthright. The crowd laughed at her words, agreeing with her and dismissing Leo before the trial had even begun. But Leo wasn't like those other humans. He had trained for years for this moment. He had studied Zalorian tactics, learned their history, and practiced their techniques. He might not have the strength of Nira or the reflexes of the other competitors, but he had something else: determination. And that was enough for him. "Let's see what happens," Leo said, keeping his voice calm. He didn't need to say more. His actions would speak for him. The crowd grew quiet as the horn sounded, signaling the start of the trial. Leo took a deep breath and stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The ground beneath his boots vibrated as the arena's massive mechanical systems kicked into action. On either side of him, large gates opened, and the first obstacle came into view. It was a wide chasm hundreds of feet across, with no visible way to cross. On the far side, a glowing platform hovered in midair. The objective was clear: cross the chasm and reach the platform on the other side. Nira wasted no time. She took a running start, her long legs pushing her effortlessly across the gap. In a single leap, she reached the platform, landing with a thud that shook the ground. The crowd cheered in awe, their respect for her skills evident. Leo stood at the edge of the chasm, staring across. The gap was too wide for him to simply leap across like Nira had. He was human, a species not designed for jumping long distances or performing feats of incredible strength. But Leo wasn't about to back down. He had to think differently. As he examined the chasm, he noticed something. On the far side of the gap, hidden in the shadows, was a small outcrop of rock. It wasn't much, but it was enough. With a small smile, Leo knew what he had to do. He turned around and scanned the area for anything that could help him. His eyes landed on a large, jagged boulder near the starting point. It was too heavy to throw, but it could be used for leverage. Leo ran toward the boulder, lifting it with all the strength he could muster. His muscles screamed in protest, but he pushed on. This wasn't the time for weakness. He dragged the boulder over to the edge of the chasm and positioned it just right, so it would serve as a platform to jump from. The move was risky, it required perfect timing, but Leo knew it was his best shot. He positioned himself on top of the boulder, took a deep breath, and, with a burst of strength, launched himself into the air. The crowd gasped as Leo soared through the air, the distance between him and the platform growing smaller with each passing second. For a moment he thought he might not make it. The air felt thick, and the wind whipped against his body, pushing him off course. But just as he began to lose hope, his foot brushed against the outcrop on the far side. It was just enough to shift his momentum and send him the rest of the way. Leo's hands gripped the edge of the platform as he landed hard, scraping his palms on the rough surface. He pulled himself up, gasping for breath, his heart racing. He had made it across. He had done it. But there was no time to rest. Nira was already ahead, effortlessly gliding through the next obstacle, which involved navigating a twisting maze of narrow passages and sharp turns. The walls of the maze shifted constantly, and the floor beneath their feet seemed to move on its own. Leo glanced at the maze, then back at Nira. She was already halfway through, moving with the precision of a trained soldier. Leo couldn't afford to waste time. He had to catch up. He stepped into the maze, his mind focused and sharp. He knew that this challenge wasn't about speed. It was about careful observation. He studied the shifting walls, watching for patterns and signs of where the passages would open and close. At first he struggled. The walls moved so quickly that it was hard to keep up. Leo was forced to backtrack several times, narrowly avoiding being crushed by a closing wall. But instead of panicking, Leo kept his cool. He trusted his instincts and paid attention to the details. His mind raced, analyzing the maze's pattern with each new step, and then he saw the perfect opening. The wall shifted, and a new path revealed itself. Leo darted forward, taking the turn just as a wall behind him slammed shut. He was ahead now, but Nira was still close behind. Leo's breathing was heavy as he moved quickly, but carefully. He had come too far to fail now. Nira might be faster, but Leo had one advantage. He had never given up, and no matter how hard the path became, he refused to stop by the time he reached the end of the maze. Leo was only a few paces behind Nira. She had slowed down, perhaps realizing that she had underestimated him. But there was no time to congratulate himself. There was still one final challenge ahead. The last obstacle was a massive, unstable bridge that stretched across an abyss. The bridge was made of an almost invisible material, and it swayed dangerously in the wind. One wrong step, and the competitor would fall into the dark chasm below. Nia moved first, confident in her abilities. She crossed the bridge with a grace that seemed effortless. Her alien reflexes allowed her to move with ease, her body perfectly in sync with the instability of the bridge. Leo, however, hesitated at the edge. He had no natural advantage. His body wasn't as fast, and he didn't have the alien agility that Nira possessed. But he knew this was his moment. He had made it this far, he couldn't stop now. With a deep breath, Leo stepped onto the bridge. This marks the end of Part 1. The challenge has just begun for Leo. And while he has managed to prove himself in some ways, the true test is still ahead. Can a human truly defy the odds and prove that the impossible is within reach? The bridge swayed beneath Leo's feet, and he fought to keep his balance. The final obstacle of the trial had begun, and it was nothing like the others. The bridge was an unsteady, narrow pathway, stretching across a deep chasm that seemed to swallow the light. One wrong move, one slip, and Leo would fall into the abyss below. Nira had crossed it easily, her body gliding over the unstable surface as though she had done it 1,000 times before. Her alien reflexes, honed through years of training, allowed her to move with speed and precision. She was nearly at the far side, her form already a distant silhouette against the bright light. Shining from the other side of the chasm, Leo looked down at the gap beneath him. The drop was far too high to survive without some sort of safety net. His heart hammered in his chest as he took a cautious step forward, testing the bridge beneath him. It creaked, the material groaning under his weight, but it held. He couldn't afford to be afraid. Fear had no place in a trial like this. The crowd was watching, and Leo could feel their eyes on him, their judgment heavy in the air. But more than that, he could feel Nira's gaze. She was already looking back at him, her face calm, almost bored, as though she knew the human would never be able to catch up. Her smile was one of quiet superiority, but Leo was not going to give up. Not now. The bridge swayed again, this time more violently, as a gust of wind swept through the arena. Leo's knees buckled slightly, and he gripped the ropes that hung on either side of him for support. His breath came in short gasps. He couldn't move too quickly, but he couldn't move too slowly either. The clock was ticking. He glanced up at the platform across from him. It seemed so far away. Nira was already halfway across, moving with such ease, while Leo felt like every step was a battle against the forces of gravity. She was fast. Confident in everything he wasn't, or so it seemed. But Leo knew something. Nira didn't. The human mind could think in ways the Zalorians couldn't. They might have speed, agility, and strength. But Leo had something far more important: creativity. With a deep breath, Leo focused on the bridge in front of him, studying the sway of the platform. He watched the way the ropes creaked, the way the planks shifted beneath his feet. It wasn't perfect, but there was a rhythm to it. Leo's mind worked quickly, analyzing the pattern of the bridge's movement. It wasn't just the wind making it shake. It was something else. He realized that the bridge was reacting to his own weight. Every step he took sent small vibrations through the structure, causing it to sway in response. If he could find the right pace, the right rhythm, maybe he could cross without falling. Leo's next step was measured, his foot landing with more care than before. He could feel the bridge wobble, but he didn't let it throw him off. Instead, he let his body move with the sway, almost like dancing with the wind. Slowly, he began to find a steady rhythm. One step at a time, Leo moved forward. Each step felt more sure than the last. The bridge didn't feel as dangerous anymore. It still swayed, but now Leo was moving in sync with its movements. He was getting closer to the platform, each step bringing him nearer to Nira, who was now at the edge of the far side, her hand reaching out toward the goal. Leo's heart raced, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from the thrill of discovery. For the first time since the trial had started, Leo felt like he had control over the situation. He wasn't going to let the impossible stop him. But as he moved forward, Nira glanced over her shoulder. Her expression shifted slightly, no longer bored, but curious. She could see him gaining on her, and it bothered her. She had always been the best at these trials. She was born to win. No human, no matter how determined, could possibly outdo her. Nira gripped the edge of the platform and pushed off with a burst of energy. Her alien muscles gave her a final push that sent her darting toward the finish line. But Leo wasn't far behind. Leo's feet pounded against the unstable surface, his body swaying with each step. The gap between him and Nira was closing. He had no special powers, no alien speed. All he had was his mind, his will, and his ability to adapt. He could see the finish line now. The platform, shining like a beacon of victory, was so close, yet so far away. The distance between him and Nira was shrinking. But he still had to make one final push. He could hear the crowd, their voices growing louder, urging him on. "Go, human, go." They chanted. Their energy seemed to fuel him, and for the first time, he truly believed he could do this. He wasn't just running to win the trial. He was running to prove something. To himself, to Nira, to everyone who had ever doubted humans. Nira reached the final stretch of the bridge, her fingers brushing the edge of the platform. She could hear Leo's footsteps behind her, but she didn't look back. She was close. She could almost taste the victory, but as she reached for the platform, the ground beneath her feet shook. The bridge lurched, and she lost her footing for just a moment. It was a split second, but it was enough. Leo saw it happen. He had been watching her, waiting for the right moment. As Nira stumbled, he surged forward, his body propelled by adrenaline and a rush of confidence. His heart pounded in his chest as he pushed himself harder than ever before. In the final stretch, Leo made it. He crossed the last few steps with speed, his body fueled by determination. With one final leap, he grabbed the edge of the platform just as Nira stumbled and lost her grip. For a moment, everything felt still. Leo's hand wrapped around the edge of the platform, his body hanging just above the chasm. He pulled himself up with every ounce of strength he had left. His legs shook, his breath ragged, but he didn't stop. He climbed, pushing past his exhaustion. Until he was standing on the platform, the crowd erupted into cheers. Nira stood frozen behind him, her mouth slightly open in shock. She had been seconds away from winning, but Leo had done the impossible. He had caught up, crossed the unstable bridge, and claimed the victory that seemed destined for someone else. Leo stood tall, breathing heavily, sweat dripping down his face, but his eyes were filled with triumph. He had done it. Against all odds, he had proven that determination, ingenuity, and heart could overcome even the greatest of challenges. He turned to face Nira, who was still standing at the edge of the bridge, her expression one of disbelief. "Did you think I wouldn't make it?" Leo asked, his voice steady but filled with pride. Nira said nothing. She could not deny it anymore. The human had done the impossible. Leo had won. The arena was alive with excitement. The crowd's cheers still echoed in Leo's ears as he stood on the platform, catching his breath. He had crossed the unstable bridge, had defied the odds, and had proven that a human could do the impossible. But this trial wasn't over yet. He had one more obstacle to face, and it was unlike anything he had encountered before. Nira stood just behind him, her face a mask of disbelief. For a moment she didn't speak. The Zalorian warrior, proud and confident in her abilities, had been outpaced by a human. It was something that hadn't happened in centuries. But now, Nira's determination flared up once again. She wasn't going to let Leo win. Not when she was so close to victory. The arena's ground trembled, and a new challenge emerged. A series of thick, vine-like ropes shot up from the ground, forming a web of paths high above. The ropes twisted and curled, weaving in and out of each other like a massive spider's web. From the center of the arena, a voice boomed. "Now, the final test," the voice said. "The path of the web. To reach the final platform, you must navigate the ropes above. Each wrong step will cause you to fall into the depths below." Leo looked up at the web, his heart sinking. It seemed impossible. The ropes were thick and long, but they swayed dangerously in the air. They moved with a life of their own, and there was no telling how steady they were. One wrong move, and it would be over. Nira didn't hesitate. She was already making her way up, climbing onto the first rope with the ease of someone who had trained for this moment her entire life. Her muscles rippled as she scaled the ropes, moving with grace and precision. The web seemed to bend under her weight, but she didn't falter. She had done this many times before. Leo, however, took a deep breath and hesitated. This wasn't just a test of physical strength. It was a test of balance, timing, and nerves. He had to be careful. One slip and it would be over. He moved toward the ropes slowly, studying them carefully. The web swayed slightly, as if testing him. Leo took a step onto the first rope. It creaked under his weight, but it held. He exhaled, trying to steady his nerves. The crowd watched, silent now. The whole arena seemed to be holding its breath. Leo moved again, carefully placing one foot in front of the other. The ropes were thick, but they weren't as sturdy as they looked. Each time he placed a foot on one of the ropes, it wobbled and twisted beneath him. The air felt thick, and the rope swayed with every movement above him. Nera was already halfway across the web, her alien body gliding easily from one rope to the next. She didn't seem to be struggling at all. In fact, she moved as if she were born to navigate these obstacles. Leo could feel the weight of her superiority in the air. She was faster, stronger, and more confident than he was. But Leo had something else. He had a different way of thinking. He wasn't just relying on strength or speed. He was watching the web carefully, analyzing the ropes, trying to figure out their pattern. He moved forward again, inch by inch. The ropes creaked, and Leo's heart raced. His eyes were fixed on the next step, and he reached out, gripping the rope with his hands. It was thick and rough, but it felt solid enough. Slowly, he moved his other foot onto the next rope, testing its strength before shifting his weight. It wasn't easy. Every movement felt like a battle, and with each step, Leo's confidence grew a little stronger. The ropes seemed to sway less with each passing moment, as if they were learning to accept him. He was adapting, and that made all the difference. Meanwhile, Nera had already reached the far side of the web. She was standing tall on the final platform, watching Leo with a mix of curiosity and impatience. He was still far behind, but she was starting to feel something she hadn't felt before: doubt. Leo wasn't supposed to be this close. He wasn't supposed to be able to keep up. Yet, there he was, steadily climbing, moving with a focus that was almost unnatural. For a moment, Nera's eyes narrowed. She had always been the one who could complete the trial faster than anyone else. She had trained her whole life for this, and now, a human was almost at the same level as her. It bothered her. Leo didn't notice the change in Nera's expression. He didn't have time to think about it. His entire focus was on the ropes ahead. One wrong move, and he would fall. The air was thick with tension as he took another careful step. Slowly working his way higher, the web seemed to stretch on forever, but Leo was making progress. The ropes were twisting now, bending in strange angles. They were no longer just a simple path. They were becoming a challenge that forced him to rethink every move. He had to climb, balance, and jump all at once. There was no room for mistakes. Each time Leo made a small jump from one rope to another, his heart raced. The crowd below him had fallen silent, all their attention fixed on his every move. They were watching something they had never seen before. The human was not just surviving. He was thriving. His determination, his careful planning, his will to succeed it was working. Nera's eyes followed Leo's every movement. She had been trained for this her entire life, and yet she couldn't help but admire the way he moved. It wasn't graceful, like her own movements. It wasn't fast or powerful, but it was steady. It was clever. And it was working. Leo reached a particularly difficult section of the web where the ropes were separated by a wide gap. The crowd held its breath as he reached out, his hand just barely able to grasp the next rope. His fingers slipped slightly, but he held on with all his strength. For a moment, Leo thought he might lose his grip, but then he remembered the words of his mentor back on Earth. It's not about how strong you are. It's about how long you can hold on. With a fierce grunt, Leo pulled himself up, swinging his other leg onto the next rope. His body swayed dangerously, but he held his ground. The gap had seemed impossible, but Leo had found a way. Slowly, carefully, he made his way to the other side, finally reaching the next platform. The crowd erupted into cheers. Leo had done it. He had made it past one of the toughest parts of the trial, but Nira wasn't done yet. She had already been standing on the final platform, her face a mix of surprise and frustration. She had expected Leo to fall. She had expected him to fail. But here he was, standing just a few steps away from her. For a moment, they stood there, facing each other. Nira was the first to speak. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, her voice quiet but filled with an edge of disbelief. Leo looked back at her, his chest heaving with exhaustion. "I'm here because I'm not giving up," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here because I believe that a human can do the impossible." Nira didn't respond at first. She just watched him, her mind racing. He had done it. He had made it farther than anyone expected. And for the first time in her life, Nira was faced with the reality that humans weren't as weak as the galaxy had always believed. Leo smiled, exhaustion forgotten for a moment. "Let's finish this." The air in the arena was thick with anticipation. The crowd had fallen silent, their eyes fixed on Leo and Nira as they stood facing the final challenge. Leo had made it this far, defying the odds with every step. But now, he was about to face the toughest obstacle yet. Ahead of them, the final test was revealed. A massive circular platform floated high above the arena floor. It hovered in midair, surrounded by glowing barriers of energy. The platform was surrounded by a series of shifting walls and beams of light that shot out from every angle. A voice echoed through the arena, booming from the speakers above. "Welcome to the final trial, the platform of light. To reach the platform, you must navigate the shifting walls and avoid the beams of energy. Only the one who reaches the center of the platform first will be crowned the victor." Leo took a deep breath. The last challenge had been difficult, but this one felt like the ultimate test. He could already see the beams of light flashing across the arena, their speed unpredictable. The walls shifted, narrowing and widening, creating obstacles that seemed impossible to get past. Nira glanced at him, a small, confident smile on her face. "This is where you'll fail, human," she said, her voice calm and almost mocking. "You've done well to get this far, but this is where it ends." Leo didn't respond. He was too focused. The fire in his chest, the determination that had fueled him since the beginning, was stronger now than ever. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to stop now. The sound of the horn blasted through the arena, signaling the start of the final trial. Without wasting a moment, Nira dashed forward, moving with the speed and precision that had gotten her this far. She was quick, and Leo could see that she wasn't holding back. She dodged the first beam of light with ease, her body twisting in the air as she evaded the shifting walls. Leo followed after her. His muscles sore from the previous trials, but his mind sharp. He didn't have Nira's speed, but he had learned something from each of the obstacles he had faced so far. Patience. He didn't need to move fast. He just needed to move smart. He watched the beams of light closely, studying their patterns. The beams would shoot out in random directions, but they always followed a rhythm. Leo took a deep breath, focusing on the movements. He saw the first beam coming toward him, and with a quick shift of his body, he ducked just in time, narrowly avoiding it. The beam's light flashed above him, but Leo had already moved to the side. His foot landing on solid ground, Nira was already halfway across, her body weaving between the beams and walls like a dancer. She seemed to float through the air, her movements effortless. But Leo wasn't far behind. He took another step, moving carefully, always aware of the beams that shot out at unpredictable angles. As Leo navigated the obstacle course, he noticed something. The walls were shifting, not just randomly, but in a pattern. If he could find that pattern, he could avoid the walls altogether. With each step, he adjusted, finding the spaces between the beams and the walls where he could pass through unharmed. The crowd watched in awe as Leo moved. It wasn't fast, but it was steady. The human was methodical, his every step calculated. He didn't waste energy or make unnecessary movements. He simply kept going, inching closer to the floating platform with every step. Nira reached the first set of walls, and with a quick burst of speed, she leaped over them. The crowd cheered as she landed smoothly on the other side. But Leo wasn't far behind. He saw the walls shift again, and he knew that now was his chance. He sprinted forward, his legs aching with each step, but he pushed through the pain. He jumped, just as the walls closed in, his body soaring over them. He landed safely on the other side, not as gracefully as Nira, but with determination in his eyes. He wasn't going to let her beat him. Not this time. As Leo moved forward, he saw the final hurdle, a narrow beam of light that stretched across the entire arena, connecting one side to the platform. It was glowing brightly, almost blinding. He knew that crossing it would be a challenge. If he didn't time it right, the light would strike him down. Nira had already reached the beam. She stood at its edge, poised and ready to jump. Leo could see that she was about to make her move. He focused his attention on the beam, watching as it shifted slightly, its light intensifying. He knew the timing had to be perfect. Nira leaped onto the beam with grace, her body moving like she had practiced this 1,000 times. But Leo didn't rush. He watched, waiting for the right moment. The beam shifted again, and he took his chance. With one final push, he jumped onto the beam, his body balancing carefully as he moved across it. It wasn't easy. The beam was narrow, and every step made it wobble under his weight. Leo kept his eyes focused on the center where the platform waited for him. His arms stretched out to the sides, trying to keep himself steady. He could hear the crowd below him, their voices rising in excitement. But he didn't let it distract him. Nira was already on the platform, standing at the center, her arms raised in victory. She had done it, or so she thought. Leo was still on the beam, only a few steps away from the platform. He was close. But Nira wasn't watching him anymore. She had turned her back to him, her eyes already fixed on the crowd. She believed the victory was hers. She didn't know that Leo had been waiting for this moment. With one final push, Leo leaped from the beam and onto the platform. His feet landed firmly on the glowing surface, just as Nira looked over her shoulder. Her eyes widened in shock as she saw him standing there. On the platform with her, the crowd erupted into applause, their cheers deafening. Leo had done it. Against all odds, he had reached the final platform. He had done what everyone thought was impossible for a human. Nira stood frozen for a moment, staring at Leo. She had been so sure that victory was hers, but now it was clear that the human had outperformed her. For the first time, Nira felt something she had never felt before: respect. Leo didn't look at her with pride or gloating. He simply stood there, breathing heavily but steady. "It's not about being the fastest or the strongest," he said, his voice calm. "It's about not giving up." Nira's eyes narrowed, but this time there was no mockery in her gaze. She nodded slowly, acknowledging the truth in his words. She had underestimated the human, and now she couldn't deny it anymore. The announcer's voice rang out across the arena. "And the victor is Leo, the human." The crowd erupted into cheers, their applause louder than ever before. Leo had done it. He had won the trial, proving that a human could do the impossible. Nira stepped forward. Offering a hand to Leo, he took it, and for a moment they stood together, sharing the victory in silence. It had been a long journey, and Leo had proven that determination, ingenuity, and heart could triumph over even the greatest of challenges.